The stars stretched out like a blanket of tiny diamonds across the black. Inside the cockpit of the small ship, the silence hummed. Kalen gripped the controls, his knuckles white. He was alone out here, just like he'd always wanted. No one telling him what to do, no one watching his every move. Just him and the endless void. His ship, the Stardust Drifter, wasn't much to look at. Old, patched up, and prone to making worrying noises. But it was his. He'd earned it, piece by piece, job by job. Hauling cargo, running messages, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on and the fuel flowing. It wasn't a glorious life, but it was free. Right now, he was on a simple milk run. Deliver a box of delicate electronics to a research station in the Kepler system. Easy money, or so he thought. A warning light blinked on the dashboard. Not good. He checked the system diagnostics. It was the portside engine. Acting up again. He sighed. Looked like he'd be doing repairs sooner than expected. He guided the Stardust Drifter towards a nearby asteroid field. It wasn't ideal, but he could use the asteroids for cover while he worked. Plus, maybe he could find some salvage to sell later. Every credit counted. As he navigated through the rocky maze, his scanner picked up something unexpected. A derelict ship, half buried in a large asteroid. It wasn't on any of his charts. Probably old and forgotten. Could be a good find, if it wasn't rigged to explode or full of space pirates. He armed his ship's ancient pulse laser. Just in case, he brought the Stardust Drifter in for a closer look. The derelict was big, much bigger than his ship. Its hull was scarred and broken, but it looked old, ancient even. Like it had been drifting out here for centuries. A strange symbol was painted on its side, faded but still visible. He didn't recognize it. Curiosity warred with caution. Derelicts could be dangerous, but they could also hold valuable tech or artifacts. He decided to dock. Carefully, he maneuvered the Stardust Drifter into the derelict's broken hangar bay. The air inside was cold and still. No power, no life signs. Just the silent, empty ship. He put on his vac suit and grabbed his multi-tool. The hangar bay was massive, easily big enough to hold a dozen ships like his. Dust covered everything in a thick layer. He floated through the silence, his footsteps echoing eerily. The symbol from the hull was repeated on the hangar wall, larger here, more detailed. It looked like a star with a circle around it. He made his way deeper into the derelict. The ship was a maze of dark corridors and silent rooms. Whatever had happened here, it had happened a long time ago. He didn't find any bodies, which was a small relief. He did find signs of a struggle in some places. Scorched walls, broken equipment. He reached what looked like the bridge. The main view screen was shattered, but the captain's chair was still intact. A datapad lay on the console, surprisingly untouched by the passage of time. He picked it up, hoping it still worked. It flickered to life, displaying a single entry. The datapad screen showed a log entry. The date was thousands of years ago. Kalen's eyes widened behind his vac suit helmet. This ship was ancient, from before the Great Collapse, before humanity scattered across the stars. The entry was short, fragmented. They came without warning. The architects. Their ships, like nothing we've ever seen. Silent, fast, our weapons, useless. Kalen frowned. Architects? He'd never heard of them. The log continued. They didn't attack us directly. Not at first. They changed things. The stars, the space between worlds, made it wrong. Travel is impossible. We're trapped. Everyone is trapped. A shiver went down Kalen's spine. Trapped? Was this why the galaxy was so fragmented now? Why jump gates were the only way to travel vast distances? Had something like this happened everywhere? Our ship is failing. Life support won't last. We sent out a beacon, a warning. Does anyone hear? Does anyone remember? The architects. They're coming for us. The entry ended there. The datapad went dark. Kalen was silent for a long moment. The architects. A name from a forgotten time, tied to a cataclysm that reshaped the galaxy. What were they? Where did they come from? He looked around the ruined bridge with new eyes. This wasn't just a derelict ship. It was a tomb, a time capsule holding a terrifying secret. He needed to get this information out. The universe needed to know. But first, he needed to check the rest of the ship. Maybe there was more information. Maybe there was something he could use. He left the bridge and moved deeper into the dark corridors. The air grew colder here. He found the crew quarters. Small rooms, personal items scattered around. It looked like people had left in a hurry. No signs of a fight here, just emptiness. He didn't linger. He searched for the ship's data core. If he could access that, he might find more logs, more information about the architects and what happened. He finally found it in a heavily reinforced room near the back of the ship. The door was sealed shut. His multi-tool wouldn't cut through it. It was designed to withstand a lot. He'd need to find another way in. Maybe there was a manual override somewhere. He checked the panels near the door, looking for anything that looked like a control. He found a small, hidden panel. He opened it carefully. Inside were a mess of wires and a single, old-looking switch. It wasn't labeled. Could this be the override? There was only one way to find out. He hesitated for a second, then flipped the switch. He heard a low hum from the door. Lights flickered on along the frame, then turned green. The heavy door hissed and slowly slid open, revealing the data core chamber. The data core chamber was cold and dark, just like the rest of the ship. In the center of the room was a large, glowing crystal structure. Wires and cables snaked out from it, connecting to consoles and screens that were now dark. This was the ship's brain, holding all its knowledge and history. Kalen approached the crystal carefully. He took out a universal data cable from his multi-tool and plugged one end into a port on the console. He plugged the other end into his datapad. He hoped the ancient system would still be compatible. After a few tense moments, his datapad screen flickered to life, showing a directory of files. It worked. He started sifting through the files. Most were standard ship's logs, maintenance records, crew manifests. But there was a section labeled Project Nightingale. He opened the Project Nightingale files. They contained detailed scientific data, astronomical charts, and more log entries. It seemed this ship was not just a transport, it was a research vessel. Project Nightingale was their mission. He read through the entries, piecing together the story. This ship, the Odyssey, was on a mission to study anomalies in the fabric of space. They had detected strange energy signatures, patterns that didn't fit any known natural phenomenon. They believed they were evidence of something else. Then, the architects arrived. The logs described them in more detail than the short entry on the bridge. They weren't organic beings, but constructs. Machines? Energy beings? The scientists weren't sure. They reshaped space itself, creating barriers that prevented faster than light travel. They didn't seem interested in conquest or destruction, just isolation. They were observed building massive structures around star systems, humming with unknown energy. The Odyssey crew realized the architects were trapping everything inside these isolated pockets of space. Their last entries were filled with dread and desperation as their ship's systems failed and the architects' structures closed in around them. Kalen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold of the chamber. The architects hadn't just trapped a few ships, they had segmented the entire galaxy. This was why travel was so difficult now. This was their legacy, and the data suggested the architects were still out there. Dormant maybe, or perhaps continuing their work in other parts of the universe. He copied all the Project Nightingale data to his datapad. This information was too important to leave behind. He needed to get it to someone who could understand it, someone who could warn the rest of humanity. He backed out of the files and looked around the chamber again. Was there anything else of value? He noticed a small, locked strongbox built into the wall. It looked different from the rest of the ship's tech. Newer maybe? He used his multi-tool to try and open it. It was tough, but eventually, the lock clicked open. Inside, on a velvet cushion, lay a single object. It was a crystal, similar to the data core, but smaller, and it pulsed with a soft, blue light. Kalen carefully picked up the blue crystal. It was smooth and cool to the touch, and the light coming from inside seemed to pulse with a gentle rhythm. It felt alive, in a way the rest of the dead ship didn't. He turned it over in his hand. Examining it closely, there were faint lines etched into its surface, too small to be seen clearly without magnification. He activated the scanner on his multi-tool and pointed it at the crystal. The scanner usually identified just about anything, but it struggled with this object. The readings were strange, high energy, but unlike anything in his database. It seemed to be generating its own power. He remembered the Project Nightingale logs, talking about the architects reshaping space and building structures with unknown energy. Could this crystal be related to that? A piece of architect technology? He tried to access the data on the crystal using his datapad, but it wouldn't connect. It wasn't a storage device in the usual sense. It felt more like a tool, or a key. He thought about the log entry that mentioned the architects trapping ships and making travel impossible. What if this crystal could counteract that? What if it was a way to navigate through the barriers the architects had created? It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. He looked back at the data core crystal, still glowing faintly in the center of the room. The small blue crystal in his hand seemed to resonate with it, pulsing a little brighter. Maybe they were meant to work together. He decided to take the blue crystal with him. He carefully placed it in a shielded compartment in his vac suit. He also made sure he had the datapad with the Project Nightingale logs securely attached to his suit. He took one last look around the data core chamber and the ruined ship. It was a place of secrets and ghosts, a monument to a forgotten conflict. He had found something important here, something that could change everything. He made his way back through the silent corridors, the blue crystal a small weight against his chest. He reached the hangar bay and his own ship, the Stardust Drifter. It looked small and vulnerable inside the massive derelict. He boarded his ship, sealed the hatch, and began the pre-flight checks. His mind was racing with the information he had found. The architects, the trapped galaxy, the strange blue crystal. As he powered up the Stardust Drifter, he looked out at the vast asteroid field. Getting back to known space wouldn't be easy. The engine was still acting up, and now he had the added worry of who else might be looking for architect technology. If this crystal was what he thought it was, there would be people, powerful people, who would want to take it from him. He eased the Stardust Drifter out of the derelict hangar bay and back into the asteroid field. The journey home just got a lot more complicated. He had a feeling his life as a simple courier was over. He was now a keeper of secrets, and secrets had a way of attracting trouble. He set a course for the nearest jump gate, a place called Port Nowhere, a lawless station on the edge of settled space. It was risky, but he needed to sell his cargo and figure out his next move. He also needed to find someone he could trust with the data from the Odyssey. Someone who would believe him. The Stardust Drifter weaved through the asteroids, a tiny speck against the vastness of space. Kalen gripped the controls, the weight of his discovery heavy on his mind. The galaxy was a lot bigger, and a lot more dangerous, than he had ever realized. The trip to Port Nowhere was tense. The Stardust Drifter's engine coughed and sputtered, making Kalen nervous. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every distant ship a potential enemy. He knew the datapad and the crystal were valuable, maybe priceless. And anything priceless tended to attract the wrong kind of attention. He ran the datapad's files through a basic encryption program he had. It wouldn't stop a serious hacker, but it might slow down anyone trying to casually snoop. The blue crystal he kept close, the soft pulsing light a strange comfort in the dark cockpit. Port Nowhere hung in space like a metallic octopus, a jumble of modules, docks, and scrap metal held together by sheer force of will and a powerful central reactor. It wasn't a place for the faint of heart. Pirates, smugglers, and all sorts of people who preferred to stay off the grid came here. That's exactly why Kalen chose it. It was the best place to disappear for a while, sell his cargo, and figure out his next move without the prying eyes of any government or corporation. He hailed the station for docking clearance. The response was a gruff voice that just gave him a bay number and a warning not to cause trouble. Standard Port Nowhere greeting. He guided the Stardust Drifter into Bay 17, a cramped space between a heavily armed freighter and a ship that looked like it was held together with duct tape and hope. He secured his ship and killed the power. The silence felt heavy after the constant hum of the engines. He changed out of his vac suit, but kept the datapad and the crystal hidden beneath his worn flight jacket. He grabbed the box of electronics he was supposed to deliver. Business first. He still needed the money. Stepping out of the Stardust Drifter, he was hit by the noise and smells of the station. The clang of metal, the distant thrum of machinery, the smell of stale air, questionable food, and something vaguely metallic. People bustled past, a mix of humans and various alien species, all looking out for themselves. He made his way through the crowded corridors, following the signs to the cargo exchange. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. Drawing attention here was a bad idea. He reached the exchange, a large, open area filled with crates and people haggling over prices. He found the receiving clerk, a bulky individual with more muscles than teeth. Got a delivery for Research Station Gamma, Kalen said, placing the box on the counter. The clerk grunted, scanned the box, and checked his manifest. Yeah, about time. Almost sent out a search party. He pushed a data chip across the counter. Credits transferred. Now get lost. Kalen took the chip, not bothering to reply. He had the money he needed for now. His next goal was to find a quiet corner and look at the datapad again. Maybe find someone who knew about ancient history or strange artifacts. As he turned to leave, a voice called out to him. Hey, kid, you the one flying that beat-up drifter? Kalen froze. He turned slowly. Standing a few yards away was a woman, tall and lean, with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. She wore a patched-up mechanic's jumpsuit and had a wrench tucked into her belt. She didn't look like trouble, but in Port Nowhere, you never knew. The woman walked closer, her gaze steady. She had a few grease smudges on her cheek, like she'd been working on an engine. Yeah, that old drifter. Distinctive sound to its pulsars. And that patch job on the starboard hull? Seen it from here. Kalen didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her, trying to figure out if she was a threat. What about it? He finally asked. Nothing, she shrugged. Just noticed it. I'm Jax. I run a repair shop here on the station. For ships that are a little outside the norm. She grinned, and it didn't seem unfriendly. Kalen relaxed a fraction. Maybe she was just a mechanic looking for business. Kalen, he replied. Kalen, she repeated, as if testing the name. So, you just drop off cargo. Or are you looking for work? Or maybe repairs? She eyed his ship parked in Bay 17. Just dropped off a delivery, Kalen said. He wasn't about to tell her about the derelict or what he found. Not yet, anyway. Engine's been giving me some trouble, though. Thought so, Jack said. Heard it whine when you came in. Bring it by my shop, Bay 23. I'll give you a fair price. I specialize in keeping the old birds flying. This could be a good opportunity. Kalen needed his engine fixed, and a mechanic who knew old ships might be able to help in other ways too, if he decided to trust her later. Port Nowhere was full of shady characters, but sometimes you found decent people in the most unlikely places. Maybe I'll do that, Kalen said. Thanks. Don't thank me yet, Jack said with a chuckle. Wait till you see the bill. But seriously, kid, be careful around here. Port Nowhere eats guys like you for breakfast. Her smile faded a little, and her eyes were serious now. Keep your head down and don't trust anyone you don't have to. Kalen nodded. He appreciated the warning. I'll remember that. Jax gave him a final, searching look, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kalen stood there for a moment, thinking. Jax seemed okay, but his guard was still up. He decided to take her advice and keep a low profile. He needed to find a place to lay low and examine the datapad in peace. He left the cargo exchange and wandered through the station. He passed food stalls selling strange-smelling alien food, shops selling all sorts of equipment, and smoky cantinas with loud music spilling out. He needed something quiet. He found a small, out-of-the-way booth in a less crowded section of the station. It wasn't fancy, just a table and a bench, but it was private enough. He ordered a bland-looking space ration meal and sat down, pulling out his datapad under the table. He activated the screen, bringing up the Project Nightingale files again. He started reading through the scientific data, trying to make sense of the complex charts and diagrams. It was tough going. His eyes glazed over with numbers and symbols he didn't understand. He focused on the log entries again. The descriptions of the architects were vague, based on observation, not direct contact. The crew of the Odyssey had been terrified and confused. He looked at the section describing the architects' structures. They were called spatial anchors in the logs. Massive, unmoving constructs that somehow manipulated space, creating unbreakable barriers. The logs included some theoretical ideas on how they might work, involving manipulating dimensions or using unknown forms of energy. Kalen rubbed his temples. This was heavy stuff, way over his head. He needed someone who understood this kind of science, this kind of history. He thought about Jax. She seemed sharp, and she worked on old ships. Maybe she knew about ancient tech? It was a risk, but he didn't know who else to turn to. He couldn't stay hidden forever, and he couldn't make sense of this alone. He made a decision. He would go to Jax's repair shop. He would get his engine fixed, and maybe, just maybe, he would cautiously show her the datapad. Kalen finished his less-than-tasty meal and got up. He felt a mix of nervousness and hope. Sharing the information he found was a risk. But keeping it to himself felt wrong. He needed help. He needed to trust someone. He decided to take a chance on Jax. He found Bay 23 on the station map. It was in a different section than the main cargo exchange, tucked away in a part of port nowhere that seemed even more run down. As he got closer, the sounds of hammering and the smell of hot metal grew stronger. Jax's repair shop was a large, open space crammed with ship parts, tools, and half-finished projects. Sparks flew from a welding torch in one corner, and music that sounded like angry robots screeched from a speaker. It was chaos, but it looked like organized chaos. He saw Jax under a small cargo runner, working on its engine. Her face was smeared with grease, and she was muttering to herself. "Hey, Jax?" Kalen said, raising his voice to be heard over the noise. Jax slid out from under the ship, wiping her hands on a rag. "Oh, hey, kid. Decided to bring the drifter in?" "Yeah," Kalen said, "the engine needs looked at. It's been acting up." "Figured," she said, nodding. "Pull it into that empty bay over there." She pointed to a bay that looked slightly less cluttered than the others. Kalen went back to Bay 17, guided the Stardust Drifter to Bay 23, and parked it. He shut down the systems and met Jax back in the main part of the shop. "All right," she said, circling his ship. "Let's have a listen." She put her hand on the hull and seemed to just feel the ship. Then she opened an access panel and peered inside, sniffing the air. Kalen watched her, impressed. She really did seem to know what she was doing. After a few minutes of poking and prodding, she closed the panel. "Yeah, she's old, but she's got good bones," Jax said. "The fuel injectors are clogging, and the primary coil is wearing down. Nothing I can't fix. It'll cost you, though." They talked prices, and Kalen agreed. It was fair, for Port Nowhere. "Listen, Jax," Kalen said, feeling his heart beat a little faster. "This was the risky part. There's something else, something I found." Jax stopped wiping her hands and looked at him, her expression guarded. "What kind of something?" Kalen hesitated for a moment, then reached inside his jacket and pulled out the datapad. "I found this on a derelict ship. An old one, really old." Jax took the datapad, her eyes narrowing slightly. She turned it over in her hands, then her thumb brushed the screen. It lit up, showing the directory. Her eyes went wide when she saw the date of the files. "Whoa," she breathed. "This is ancient." She looked at Kalen. "Where did you find this?" "Out in the Kepler system," he said. "In an asteroid field. The ship was called the Odyssey." Jax's fingers quickly navigated the datapad, her eyes scanning the file names. She found the Project Nightingale folder. Project Nightingale? Never heard of it. She opened the files and started reading, her brow furrowed in concentration. Kalen watched her face as she read. He saw surprise, then disbelief, then a growing sense of alarm. She read faster, her eyes darting across the screen. The sounds of the workshop faded away for Kalen. This was it. He was sharing the secret. After several minutes, Jax looked up from the datapad, her face pale beneath the grease smudges. She stared at Kalen as if seeing him for the first time. "The architects," she whispered. "Spatial anchors. This can't be real." Zara stared at the datapad, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. The sounds of the workshop seemed to fade away. "The architects," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Spatial anchors. I thought these were just old spacer ghost stories." Kalen watched her, relief flooding through him. She believed him, or at least, she wasn't dismissing it outright. "They're real," he said. "The ship I found. The Odyssey, it was one of the ships trapped when it happened." Zara sank onto a nearby workbench. Still clutching the datapad, she quickly scrolled through more of the logs, her lips moving silently as she read. "This explains so much," she murmured. "The lost colonies, the sudden disappearance of entire fleets. Everyone thought it was wars or natural disasters. But it was this. The architects. They just cut off parts of the galaxy." She looked up at Kalen, her eyes intense. "This data, it's incredible. And terrifying. If this information got out, it would shake the foundations of every government and corporation out there." "That's why I came to you," Kalen said. "I didn't know who else to trust. I figured a mechanic who deals with ancient ships might understand this kind of thing." Zara gave a short, humorless laugh. "Understand it? Kid, this is beyond understanding. This is history. Real, true history that's been hidden for thousands of years. She tapped the datapad. And you just stumbled upon it in a beat-up derelict. She paused, thinking. Okay, she said, her voice becoming more businesslike. First thing, this datapad needs to be secured. Port Nowhere isn't exactly known for its secure data storage. Anyone with half a brain and the right tools could crack your encryption. I figured, Kalen said. Do you have a safe place? Zara nodded towards a heavily reinforced door in the back of the shop. My office. It's shielded and locked down tight. Not even the station authorities can get in there without a warrant. And they don't bother me much. What do we do with the information? Kalen asked. That's the big question, isn't it? Zara said, looking back at the datapad. This could change everything, but it could also cause panic. Or worse, powerful people might try to bury it, or use it for their own gain. The logs mentioned a crystal, Kalen said, remembering the object he found. In the data core chamber. It pulsed with blue light. I brought it with me. Zara's eyes widened again. You found a crystal? What kind of crystal? I don't know, Kalen admitted. My scanner couldn't identify it. It felt like energy. And it seemed to react to the data core. He reached inside his jacket and carefully pulled out the blue crystal, showing it to Zara. Zara took the crystal from him, holding it in her palm. The blue light pulsed softly. She held it near the datapad, and the screen flickered slightly. Interesting, she murmured. The logs talked about the architects using some kind of energy manipulation. Maybe this crystal is a key? Or a power source? The logs also had some theories about the spatial anchors, Kalen said. How they might be overcome. Zara looked at the crystal, then back at the datapad, a spark of something new in her eyes. Not just fear, but possibility. If this crystal can interact with architect technology, maybe it could interact with the spatial anchors themselves. You mean, like, open them? Kalen asked, a sense of awe building in him. Maybe, Zara said, a slow smile spreading across her face. If we can figure out how it works. Kid, you didn't just find a piece of history. You might have found a way to rewrite the future. Rewrite the future? Kalen felt a surge of excitement, quickly followed by a wave of worry. How? We don't know how the crystal works, or how the spatial anchors work, not really. And even if we did, what could two people do against something that trapped a whole galaxy? Zara ran a hand through her greasy hair, her eyes sparkling with a fierce energy. We figure it out, kid. That's what we do. You found the data, and you found the crystal. I've got the knowledge of old tech, the tools, and a secure place to work. Together, we have a chance. She looked at the blue crystal in her hand, then at the datapad. This, Project Nightingale, data. It has theories about the spatial anchors. How they manipulate space-time. If we can understand those theories, and if this crystal is somehow connected to architect technology, maybe we can find a way to counter it. But where do we start? Kalen asked. First, we secure this datapad in my office, Zara said, standing up. Then, we examine this crystal more closely. My scanners are better than that multi-tool of yours. Maybe I can get a better reading on its energy signature, figure out what it's made of, how it's powered. She led the way to the reinforced door she had pointed out earlier. She opened it, revealing a small, cluttered office with a single desk and a lot of monitors. It looked like another kind of organized chaos. She placed the datapad on the desk and closed the door, the heavy lock clicking into place. Okay, she said, turning back to Kalen. Now, the crystal. She took the blue crystal to a workbench and placed it on a padded surface. She brought over a complex-looking scanner on a movable arm and positioned it over the crystal. She activated the scanner, and a beam of green light played over the crystal. Readings appeared on a nearby monitor. Zara watched the screen intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Getting some strange energy signatures, she muttered. Fluctuating. And the composition, it's not like any known element. Almost seems to be shifting. Kalen leaned closer, trying to make sense of the graphs and numbers on the screen. It was all technical jargon to him. Can you tell what it does? Not yet, Zara said. But it's definitely active, and it's resonating with something distant. Like it's trying to connect to a network. A network? Kalen thought back to the architect structures described in the logs. The spatial anchors. Were they connected? Was the crystal trying to connect to them? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. The datapad mentioned the architect's building structures, Kalen said. Spatial anchors. Could the crystal be trying to connect to them? Zara paused her work and looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. It's possible. If the crystal is a piece of their tech, it might be keyed to their network. But why? And what would happen if it connected? They were silent for a moment, considering the possibilities. This crystal could be a key to unlocking the galaxy, or it could be a beacon that alerted the architects to their presence. We need more information, Zara said finally. The datapad has theories, but we need practical data. How do these anchors work on a fundamental level? What are their weaknesses? The Odyssey logs didn't have that, Kalen said. They were cut off before they could find out. Then we need to find another source, Zara said. Another ship that encountered the architects? Or maybe one of their structures? Kalen swallowed. Going near a spatial anchor sounded incredibly dangerous. But the thought of leaving the galaxy fragmented, of letting the architect's work stand, felt wrong. Do you know where we could find more information? Kalen asked. Zara looked at the blue crystal, then back at Kalen, a determined look on her face. I might. There are rumors, old legends among spacers, about places where the barriers are thin. Places where the scars of the architect's work are still visible. Maybe we can find a clue there. A place where the barriers are thin? Kalen said, considering it. You mean, like, close to one of the spatial anchors? Zara nodded, her gaze fixed on the blue crystal. That's what the legends say. Places where reality feels off. Where strange things happen. If we can find one, maybe we can study the barrier, see how it works. And maybe, just maybe, figure out how this crystal fits in. It sounds dangerous, Kalen said. Everything is dangerous out here, kid, Zara replied, a wry smile touching her lips. But staying here and doing nothing is also dangerous. That datapad and crystal are a magnet for trouble. The fewer people who know we have them, the better, and the faster we figure out what they do, the safer we'll be. Kalen knew she was right. He couldn't go back to being a simple courier, not now. He was involved in something much bigger. And he had a feeling Zara was the best chance he had of surviving it. Okay, he said, making up his mind. I'm with you. Where do we go? Zara went over to a battered star chart on the wall of her office. It was covered in notes and markings. There are a few rumored locations, she said, tracing lines on the chart with her finger. Most are deep in uncharted space, or in areas controlled by dangerous factions. But there's one. It's an old nebula, the Krellis Nebula. There are stories of ships going missing in there, strange energy fluctuations. Some say it's haunted by the ghosts of trapped ships. Zara continued, the Valoris Nebula. It's not too far from here, relatively speaking. And it's mostly empty, so we're less likely to run into trouble, the humankind, anyway. How long will it take to get there? Kalen asked. A few days with the drifter, once I get her engine fixed, Zara said. Speaking of which, I should get back to work. The sooner your ship is ready, the sooner we can leave this dust trap. Over the next day, while Zara worked on the Stardust Drifter, Kalen stayed low in her office. Studying the datapad, he read through the Project Nightingale logs again and again, trying to find any detail he might have missed. He also researched the Valoris Nebula using the station's limited data network, finding only the same old rumors and warnings. When the Stardust Drifter's engine was finally purring smoothly, Kalen felt a surge of confidence. Zara was a miracle worker. She's ready, Zara announced, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. Better than new. I even tweaked the shields a bit. Kalen smiled. Thanks, Zara. How much do I owe you? We'll settle up later, kid, she said with a wave of her hand. Right now, we've got a date with a spooky nebula. Go get your gear. We leave at dawn. Kalen gathered his few belongings, made sure the datapad and the blue crystal were secure, and met Zara back at the Stardust Drifter. She had packed a few extra supplies and some more advanced scanning equipment. As the first faint light of the distant star touched the station, Kalen and Zara piloted the Stardust Drifter out of Port Nowhere. They left the noise and chaos behind, heading into the quiet, waiting black of space. Their destination, the Valoris Nebula, a place of mystery and potential danger, and possibly the key to understanding the architects and their ancient barriers. The Stardust Drifter hummed through the silent void, the stars outside the cockpit windows blurring into streaks of light as they traveled at high sub-light speed. Kalen was at the controls, his eyes fixed on the navigation screen. Zara was in the co-pilot seat, monitoring the ship's systems and studying the datapad. The journey to the Valorous Nebula was mostly uneventful, which suited Kalen just fine. They passed a few other ships, mostly freighters and independent traders, but kept their distance. In this part of space, it was best not to attract attention. They talked for hours during the journey. Kalen told Zara about his life as a courier, the endless lonely jumps, the run-ins with pirates and space worms. Zara shared stories about her time as a mechanic, the strange ships she'd worked on, and the even stranger people she'd met in places like Port Nowhere. They also talked about the architects and the data from the Odyssey. They went over the logs again and again, trying to find any hidden meanings or overlooked clues. The theories about the spatial anchors were complex, talking about folding space and manipulating dimensions in ways that were hard to imagine. The blue crystal sat on the console between them, pulsing softly. They ran more scans on it, trying different frequencies and energy pulses, but they still couldn't figure out exactly what it did or how it worked. It remained a mystery, a strange artifact from a forgotten time. As they got closer to the Valorous Nebula, the stars outside began to change. They became less distinct, blurred by vast clouds of gas and dust. The nebula itself was a swirling mass of purple and blue, beautiful but also a little eerie. According to the old charts, the nebula is supposed to be unstable, Zara said, pointing at the navigation screen. Lots of energy fluctuations, gravitic distortions. That's probably why ships went missing in here. Or maybe it's because of the spatial anchors, Kalen suggested. Could be both, Zara replied. The architect's work might have made the natural instability even worse. We need to be careful. The drifter is tough, but she's not built for flying through a cosmic blender. They slowed the ship as they entered the outer edges of the nebula. The ride became bumpier, the ship occasionally shaking as they hit pockets of turbulent energy. Warning lights flickered on the dashboard, indicating minor system overloads. Kalen kept a tight grip on the controls. His knuckles white. He had flown through rough patches of space before, but this felt different. It felt unnatural. Getting some weird readings on the long-range scanner, Zara said, her voice tense. Energy signatures that don't match anything in my database. Similar to the readings from the crystal, but much, much larger. Spatial anchors? Kalen asked, his voice low. Maybe, Zara said, or maybe just the nebula doing its thing. Hard to tell the difference out here. They navigated deeper into the purple and blue clouds. The visibility dropped, the gas and dust swirling around the ship. Kalen had to rely mostly on his sensors and Zara's guidance. Suddenly, a warning siren blared. Energy spike, Zara shouted. Directly ahead, Kalen looked at the main view screen, but all he saw was swirling gas. I don't see anything. It's not visible light, Zara said quickly. It's a gravitic distortion. Brace yourself. Kalen instinctively tightened his grip on the controls. The Stardust Drifter was suddenly hit by an unseen force, throwing them violently to the side. Alarms screamed as the ship's systems went haywire. The Stardust Drifter spun violently, the G-force pressing Kalen back into his seat. Loose items flew around the cockpit. Warning lights flashed red across the dashboard. Kalen fought with the controls, trying to regain control of the tumbling ship. Beside him, Zara was doing the same, her hands flying over her console. Damage report, Kalen yelled over the screaming alarms. Multiple system failures, Zara shouted back. Navigation offline, shields down, engines. They're sputtering. The ship finally stopped spinning, but it was still drifting, its nose pointed in a direction Kalen didn't recognize. The view screen showed only swirling purple and blue gas. Kalen checked his own console. His instruments were mostly dead. He looked at Zara. What hit us? Zara was tapping rapidly on her datapad, which seemed to be one of the few things still working. It wasn't a physical object. The scanners didn't pick anything up. It was, like space itself twisted, a massive gravitic distortion, just like the datapad described the architect's work. A cold knot formed in Kalen's stomach. They had found what they were looking for. Or rather, it had found them. They were inside the architect's territory now. Can you get anything back online? Kalen asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Working on it, Zara replied, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Need to reroute power. Looks like the primary conduit took a hit. Sparks flew from a damaged panel on the ceiling. The smell of burnt ozone filled the cockpit. Kalen unstrapped himself and carefully floated over to the panel, grabbing a fire extinguisher just in case. Zara managed to restore auxiliary power, bringing some of the lights back on, though they flickered unsteadily. "Okay, we have basic life support and limited internal power," she said. "Still no navigation, no long-range comms. And the main engines are dead. We're drifting." Kalen looked out the viewscreen at the swirling nebula. Drifting here was a death sentence. They could hit an asteroid they couldn't see, or be caught in another distortion. "Can you fix the engines?" he asked. "Maybe," Zara said, looking at him with a grim expression. "But it's going to take time. And I'll need to do it from the engine room. It's not exactly a smooth ride right now." The ship creaked and groaned around them, small impacts rattling the hull. Nebula debris, Kalen realized. "All right," he said, "I'll stay here, try to keep the ship stable and monitor what I can. You go to the engine room. Be careful." Zara nodded. She grabbed a portable toolkit and clipped a work light to her belt. "Don't touch anything important while I'm gone," she said with a weak smile. "Wouldn't dream of it," Kalen replied. He watched as she squeezed out of her seat and made her way towards the back of the ship, her work light bobbing in the dim corridor. He was alone in the cockpit again, the silence this time not peaceful, but tense and heavy. He strapped himself back into the pilot's chair. He still had the blue crystal on the console. He picked it up, looking at its soft blue pulse. Could this thing have protected them? Or was it somehow involved in what happened? He didn't know. He focused on the limited sensors that were still working. He was getting faint energy readings, the same strange signatures Zara had seen earlier, coming from deeper within the nebula. They were still out there. The architects, or their work. His job was to keep the ship from being torn apart while Zara fixed the engines. It was a simple job, but in the heart of the Valorous Nebula, nothing felt simple anymore. The ship was filled with the sounds of stress, the groaning of metal, the occasional shower of sparks, and the distant clanging from the engine room where Zara was working. Kalen sat in the pilot's chair, monitoring the few active systems. The gravitic distortion had shut down most of his instruments, but he could still feel the subtle shifts and pulls of the nebula's strange energies. The blue crystal on the console pulsed a little brighter now, its light seeming to react to the energy signatures outside the ship. Kalen wondered again if it was a key or a target. Time stretched on. Every minute felt like an hour. Kalen thought about the Odyssey, the derelict ship where he found the datapad. Its crew had been trapped too, their ship slowly failing. He didn't want the Stardust Drifter to become another ghost ship in the nebula. He tried hailing Zara on the internal comms. "Zara, how's it going?" Her voice came back, tinny and strained. "It's a mess in here, Kalen. The conduit is fused, and there's energy feedback everywhere. I'm trying to bypass the damaged section, but it's risky." "Be careful," Kalen said. "Always am," she replied, and the comms went silent again, replaced by the sounds of her working. Kalen looked out the viewscreen. The purple and blue gas swirled and shifted, sometimes forming strange, fleeting shapes that looked almost like structures. Was it just the nebula, or was it something else? Were the spatial anchors out there, hidden in the gas? He remembered the architect's description from the datapad, not organic, but constructs that reshaped space. The gravitic distortion that hit them fit that description perfectly. It was like a hole had been punched through reality itself, and they had been caught on the edge of it. He kept an eye on the energy readings. They were still there, faint but persistent, deeper in the nebula. They seemed to be drawing closer, or perhaps the drifting ship was moving towards them. He wished he could do something more, something to help Zara, or to protect the ship. But his skills were in flying, not fixing. All he could do was wait and watch. Another jolt ran through the ship, less violent than the first, but still strong enough to rattle Kalen in his seat. A nearby control panel sparked and went dark. "Zara," Kalen called out on the comms. No answer. "Zara," he repeated, his voice louder this time, a note of panic creeping in. Still nothing. Had something happened to her? Had the unstable energy in the engine room finally caused a serious accident? He couldn't wait any longer. He unstrapped himself again and hurried out of the cockpit, moving as quickly as he could through the dimly lit corridor. The ship groaned around him, the sounds of stress more pronounced now. He reached the door to the engine room. It was slightly ajar, which was unusual. Zara always sealed off any area she was working on. He pushed the door open cautiously. The engine room was a tangle of pipes and wires, dimly lit by emergency lights. Steam hissed from a ruptured pipe, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt metal. And on the floor, near the main engine housing, lay Zara. Kalen rushed to Zara's side. She was lying still, her face pale, her breathing shallow. He gently checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. There were no visible injuries, but her multi-tool lay beside her, sparking faintly where it had overloaded. The air around the fused conduit shimmered strangely. He remembered Zara mentioning energy feedback. Had she been hit by a surge of this strange nebula energy while trying to fix the engine? The datapad's logs had talked about the architects manipulating energies. It made sense that those energies would be dangerous. Kalen carefully moved Zara away from the damaged conduit, pulling her towards a clearer section of the engine room. He unclipped a medkit from the wall and quickly scanned her with its diagnostic tool. The scan showed severe energy exposure, affecting her nervous system. She wasn't dying, but she was out cold and needed help he couldn't provide with just a basic medkit. He looked at the damaged engine. The bypass Zara was attempting looked halfway complete, but the main conduit was a mess of twisted, sparking metal. He had no idea how to fix it. His engineering knowledge was limited to basic maintenance, not repairing critical systems after an energy surge from what might be alien technology. They were still drifting in the nebula. Every few minutes, another minor tremor would shake the ship. The faint energy readings from deeper within the nebula seemed to be getting stronger. He had to do something. He looked at the blue crystal he had brought with him. It was still pulsing. He took it out, holding it in his hand. Could this crystal, a piece of architect technology itself, somehow counteract the energy affecting Zara and the ship? It was a desperate thought, but he was running out of options. He brought the crystal closer to Zara, then towards the damaged conduit. As the crystal got near the sparking metal, its blue light flared brightly. The sparking stopped, the strange shimmering around the conduit faded. Kalen stared, amazed. The crystal was reacting. It seemed to be stabilizing the wild energy. He carefully placed the crystal near the fused conduit. The blue light pulsed steadily now, bathing the damaged area in a soft glow. He watched, half expecting the conduit to magically repair itself. It didn't, but the dangerous energy feedback was gone. Okay, so the crystal could stabilize the energy, but it couldn't fix the physical damage. He still needed to repair the engine. He looked at Zara, still unconscious. He couldn't fix it without her guidance, and she needed medical attention. He had to get them out of the nebula. Even if the Stardust Drifter's main engines were down, maybe he could use the thrusters, the maneuvering jets, to slowly, painstakingly navigate out of the worst of the nebula's energy currents. It would be slow, dangerous work, and he'd be flying blind without proper navigation, but it was their only chance. He went back to the cockpit. The blue crystal felt warm in his hand now. He placed it on the console again. The energy readings from deeper in the nebula were definitely stronger. Whatever was out there was getting closer. He sat in the pilot's seat, taking a deep breath. He looked at the dead navigation screen, the sparking control panel, the swirling gas outside. Then he looked at the blue crystal, pulsing with its steady, calming light. He gripped the controls, his resolve hardening. He had found the secret of the architects, stumbled upon a power that could change the galaxy, and now his friend was hurt because of it. He wasn't going to let it end here. He wasn't going to become another lost ship in the Valorous Nebula. Using the ship's auxiliary power and his knowledge of the thruster system, Kalen began the slow, careful process of trying to maneuver the Stardust Drifter. Each small burst of power was a gamble. He had no idea which direction was the right one, only that he had to get away from the increasing energy signatures. Hours blurred into a tense, exhausting struggle. The ship groaned and protested with every maneuver. Kalen's eyes burned from staring at the dim, unreliable sensors. He was guided only by his gut feeling and the subtle changes in the nebula's currents. He didn't know if he was heading towards the edge of the nebula or deeper into its heart. He didn't know if the architects, or whatever was creating the energy signatures, were aware of him. All he could do was keep going, keep trying. Just when he felt like he couldn't stay awake any longer, a new reading appeared on a secondary sensor that was still active. A faint, but steady, signal. Not like the chaotic energy of the nebula. It was a navigation beacon. He looked at the heading. It was weak, but it was there. A way out? Or a trap? He didn't know, but it was a direction, the first clear direction he'd had since they were hit. He adjusted his course, firing the thrusters in short, controlled bursts, inching the Stardust Drifter towards the signal. It was a gamble, a big one. But they needed to get out of the nebula, and Zara needed help. As they got closer, the signal grew stronger. It was definitely a standard navigation beacon, broadcasting a recognized code. Not architect technology. Could it be another ship? A station? Finally, through the swirling gas, Kalen saw it. A small, automated navigation buoy, anchored in space. And beyond it, the gas of the nebula began to thin, revealing the fainter, less chaotic light of distant stars. They were nearing the edge. Relief washed over Kalen, so strong it made his hands tremble on the controls. He had done it, he had gotten them out. He piloted the Stardust Drifter past the buoy and into the clearer space beyond the nebula's edge. The ship was battered, the engines dead, but they were out of the immediate danger. He contacted Zara again on the comms. Zara, we're out of the nebula. We're safe. A moment of silence, then a weak voice. Kalen, you did it. Yeah, I did it, he said, a tired smile touching his lips. The crystal, it helped. It stabilized the energy. Interesting, she murmured. We'll need to study that. Her voice was weak, but clearer now that they were out of the intense energy field. You need a doctor, Kalen said. I'll set a course for the nearest station. He checked the long-range sensors. With the nebula's interference gone, they were working again. There was a small medical station in a nearby system. It would take them a while to drift there, even using the thrusters for minor adjustments, but they would make it. He set the course and leaned back in his seat. Exhausted but alive, he looked at the blue crystal on the console. It had saved them, in a way. But it also raised more questions. What was it? What were the architects? And what would they do now with the knowledge and the power he had found? This adventure was far from over. It had just begun.